just editing a little footage of an interview I did with a lady who fled her home because her husband was plotting and tried to sacrifice their 4-year-old son in a witch doctor ceremony.
He wants to kill his own child. We protect many children from witch doctors because they want the special needs children. So you're very safe because we have 7 Maasai warriors working every day at night time to make sure no one can come. And we have the security button for the armed men to come. The husband, has he killed any?
Yes.
Yes. Then I will get to work on finding him. Because any man who has killed children needs to be stopped before he does it again.
It's very difficult here to try and convey back to the West what actually goes on. When you see the things that I see, you find it hard to compute and you see it in person. So I can't imagine how difficult it is for you guys back home. It happens still in the West as well, that we get these people who get very caught up in their lower selves and they express it in dark, dark ways. We know it. And here it's being expressed with these witch doctors. You know, I want to share positive things and I'll always try my best to, but I should also share my reality because I'm here and people should know why. And I know many people find it hard to believe and hard to grasp it. And many might even switch off before they grasp what I'm trying to talk about. But I've seen this and it's real. And it's messed up. It's really messed up on every level. I see things you won't ever hear about. I've seen things that I actually wished I hadn't seen here. And it's unbelievable to me still. So I can only imagine for you guys that it's 50,000 times more difficult to absorb and to take in what this guy from the northeast of England is telling you is happening. So.
The topic that I will speak into is a very heavy and dense topic, but I share into it as a man with first-hand experience, and therefore I share into it to provide hope, to provide clarity. For many are confused at this time. Many do not understand, comprehend how such elements of human behavior can come to pass. But this speaks directly into the necessity of our individual responsibility. Our individual responsibility toward enlightenment or spiritual rebirth or awakening. When a man or a woman has been embodied by the light of creation, the original source of creation, their field becomes an impenetrable field, meaning the spirits or the potential energies that exist dormant yet prowling all around us are unable to penetrate that human being and animate their behavior, their intelligence in manners that are severely distorted, in manners that take the transformative power and love of creation and place it into positions of downward destruction and harm and suffering. When the human is filled with the light, which is the Christ, we can point at with that term Christ for the light that fills a man and makes him impenetrable to these forces that prowl and are present, then you begin to see that there is a solution-based approach. And this approach is outside of not only protests or politics, but a far deeper, ancient truth of a spirit that has existed since Eden, as it were. A spirit that is finding itself manifesting in the islands and lives of billionaires and the elite, and in the witch doctors that we are fighting week on week here in East Africa. Child sacrifice is not an aloof notion. It is not some sort of conspiracy. In certain parts of the world, it has become far more segregated as potential conspiracy, as our lives have been built upon a space of love and safety that can't comprehend the boundaries of the goodness of our imagination, can't reach the depth of the darkness, and so it seems implausible. Yet here I sit, having 13 nearly years in a few months' time of experience here, and from nearly the outset having to protect children from ritualistic sacrifice. Here I wish to share the metaphysics. I want you to understand the exchange that these men and women that are engaged in this practice are claiming is taking place. I want you to understand that there is a systematic religious approach, and the same spirit that has embodied the witch doctors and the unfortunate souls that have believed that they should engage in these practices is the identical spirit that has enveloped the elite, and the revelation, the disclosure of the 3 million plus documents from the Epstein files are sharing ultimately the reality of this spirit, for it has overreached. And with the arrival of light is a declaration of war, a war based in love. For you cannot fight that enemy with the same faculties, with the same expressions, with the same ways by which it moves, by which it functions in this world. The declaration of war must be one of love, and the tools must be very specific, for without that love, your field can be penetrated. And even if you are unable to be penetrated enough to be animated by that spirit to behave in such distorted and frankly evil manners, you can still be penetrated to make you a lesser version with lesser strength by other more minor spirits that dismantle and drain the energy that is needed to tackle, purify, and bring light to these problems. You see, light doesn't go to war. Light doesn't fight. Light simply arrives. And when light arrives, darkness has nowhere to hide. And this distinction has profound value, for you recognize that light is not playing the game of good and evil. Light is, and its arrival illuminates distortion. As St. Francis said, a single sunbeam can cast away many shadows. All the darkness in the world cannot extinguish the light of a single candle. And how valuable this is, for we, as we go into this topic, which is heavy, must recognize that any sense that our light is diminishing due to this topic is an error. We must keep the light of rejoicing and thanksgiving bright and glowing inside of our soul, so that the dark cannot encroach upon us and cannot extinguish it. At the edge of the glow of that light, there will be skirmishes in the physical and in the spiritual. But it cannot reach the heart of that light Only you can extinguish your own light by entering what the universal adversary seeks from us all, the consumptive state of despair. Here in East Africa and parts of West Africa, child sacrifice is prevalent. Recently here, last week I believe, a father was sentenced to hanging for sacrificing his own 4-year-old son. This is a spirit of profound power. To be able to penetrate the God-given elements of rising creative force that all humans hold and possess, the force of a father to protect his children, is one of the most indomitable forces, impenetrable forces, self-sacrificial forces that the light can hold inside the structure of a human ego. And yet this father was brought down by the world and by the suggestiveness of the witch doctors. And that spirit that is ultimately using these avatars in the human story to express itself, to bring that sacred wall down and actually sacrifice his own 4-year-old son. In my own life, I once had a lady arrive late at night, and we asked her to sleep as she was distressed and she was frightened. And the following day I spoke to her, and she had fled from hours away, hearing that we were a place where she could find safety and refuge. And she had fled as she had heard her husband openly planning to sacrifice their child. His view, what the Spirit had convinced him: if you take something as innocent in creation as a child, as close to the birth of creation into physical form as a child, and you destroy that force, destroy that creation, that innocence, then there is an exchange. And that exchange is the same exchange that the elites are being lured into. And that exchange is one that offers the human an invigorated sense of energy. This may sound unreal, but if you listen to the human beings that have been engaged in this, those who have been caught, those who have been trialed, those who have been rehabilitated, they will speak of this energy when you perform these rituals, making them feel very strong and present. And the very same discussion arises when you speak with those who are consuming. And forgive the heaviness of this, but we must go through it, for we must recognize why we must become impenetrable light, why we must allow the light to arrive, for in that space, as we are the openings of the light that can tackle these spirits, then darkness has no place to hide. In the neighboring nation of Tanzania, Uganda, families sometimes must hire security guards to protect the graves of loved ones. Those who engage in the practice of consuming human flesh say that they feel invigorated and strong for days on end after consuming it. They speak of it not as a food but as a drug. They speak in the same manner with child sacrifice as a type of drug, a high that they are receiving. When they are engaging within this, therefore, they are having in the structure of the religion a transaction. I will take the rising energy of creation and the potential expression of that creation and its love and its peace, and I am going to destroy that opportunity for the generous heart of God to live a life of peace and creation and wonder and care, I am going to sever it through the abuse of free will, or perhaps the interference of free will through unresolved trauma, as humanity has allowed these spirits, and this spirit in particular, to dominate and harm too much of our society for too long. Aleister Crowley wrote a book dedicated to child sacrifice, and I want to emphasize the metaphysics of this. Aleister Crowley did not deem that child sacrifice was only for a grown child or a living human being. Aleister Crowley also connected that child sacrifice was the use of sexual creative force being spilled in exchange for worldly desire, and some have labelled that sex magic. The notion being that the gift of the generous heart of God pouring forth creation for humans to live a life that can be like a piece of holy art, that the story can be a holy masterpiece in the eternal stories of the cosmos. And when those stories grow to such brightness and beauty, I am certain when they come to a close, they feed back into the heart of creation to allow for even more beautiful stories to arise. That is the will of the undistorted Christ and its heart. But by taking that energy and destroying it, be it in Crowley's words through child sacrifice of a man's semen, or be it through the physical killing of an innocent child, the same metaphysical process is occurring. The generative force of creation and love is being taken and destroyed, and in the destruction of it, an exchange with a spirit is taking place. The witch doctors are doing it through the same religious doctrine as the billionaires on the island. It is an energy exchange. And however they take that innocence, be it through death or whatever else it may be, the exchange is still an exchange with that spirit, is how the witch doctors see it, and how the one speaking through a multitude of inexplicable events has experienced it. My, as a human, first experience with this was many years ago. A beautiful little girl called Nimzana that I was helping in the community, someone I had a relationship with. I had already bonded with this child. I loved this child. I loved this child's family. One morning, the police arrived with Nimzana and her mother. That night, a gang from the witch doctors had came to their home and were trying to break down the door. And they shouted to the mother, "Hand us the child and we will not hurt you." They wanted Nimzana. Nimzana, being special needs in the eyes of the witch doctors, has an additional level of purity. She is free of sin, for her body has never enabled her to commit sin. And therefore they highly prize such children in their dark and distorted beliefs. They told me how the neighbours had heard the commotion, and the father and sons had ran with machetes and chased these men away. And they stood guard that night until the police could come in the morning, where they brought me this child who I know and said, "Will you protect them?" And I was reasonably new to Tanzania, and I said, "We already are." And they said, "No, you don't understand. Somebody wanted to sacrifice this child last night. Someone wanted to kidnap her, we presume for sacrifice or ritual." That altered the course of my life. And from that moment on, our children's homes, our villages are protected by our first line of defense, the Maasai warriors, the most feared tribe in Africa, they say. Those who were deemed the lion killers, for they traditionally had to kill a lion to become a warrior one-on-one. They had to go out and go through this rite of passage as a man, a spectacular feat of primal energy within a human to go and challenge a predator of that nature, and also not without causality, as the predator was seen as competition, as they would take their cows and they survive off the back of their cows.
Ambao wanasaidika kama hii shule ya kwetu awali, mara kwanza ile mkono wa John alikuwa mkubwa sana. Mtu mlemavu zamani watu walikuwa wanaona kama ni mkozi akipatikana kwenye familia miaka hiyo ya nyuma. Lakini sasa hivi watu wamepata ile elimu, na baada pia wale watoto na wenyewe kusaidika na wazazi wake akaja kaona kwamba jinsi anaposaminiwa kwenye ile shirika, kila mtu alimuona yule mtoto wake ni muhimu. Wana baadhi ya wale watoto walemavu, kuna wengine alikuwa akifungiwa nyumba. Mzazi anamuona ni mzigo, alikuwa anaona kama ni laana fulani. Tuseme tu tushukuru Mungu, maana sasa hivi hatuna walemavu kama wale. Kazi yangu kama askari pale, kazi ya muhimu ni kwa ajili ya kulinda wale watoto walemavu. Kwa nini? Miaka hiyo ya nyuma kulikuwa kuna sana fulani ambao kuna ile witch doctor, waganga wanaweza kachukua viungo wa wale watoto kwenda kufanyia mazingara yao ambao sisi pia hatujui. Lakini pia tulikuwa tunasimama pale kwa ajili ya kuangalia usalama wa wale watoto walemavu, na wenyewe nao ni watu kama sisi.
So the Maasai warriors entered our lives and became the protectors of our village. We have also now armed response units and armed patrols at some of our locations. Men with automatic shotguns and a truck filled with men who are armed, who arrive rapid response if the Maasai feel overwhelmed and they need to hit the panic button, as we call it. So this is a real part of our physical life. It's a part of our life we've had to structure ourselves to be protected from. When I mention Nimzana, I may also ask you all to pray for her, for at present she is severely sick in hospital with pneumonia, which is the #1 cause of mortality in children with cerebral palsy around the world. So I ask for prayers for her at this time. The body of a human is filled with a multitude of sacred impulses. Sacred impulses to procreate, to have more children. Sacred impulses to protect. Those sacred impulses within us must be cocooned by an enlightened field, a Christic field. If they are not embodied or protected by that field, spirits of distortion can enter. And the very nature of a human that is born from the gift and beauty of two souls in love uniting and providing the reaction and connection so that a child can be born, so I could have been born and you could be born, can become distorted by the alternative spirit. And when a human carries within them any form of void, then that distortion becomes far easier to manipulate. So again, I return back to this topic, feeling hopeless. You must keep your candle burning bright. It is your duty. This is a declaration of war against this darkness. But the weapon comes from that light. And if you keep that light centered, which we shall not go over, for we all know what it is to live a life where we are not being alerted by our holy conscience of shame and the like. And for those who are too far gone and cannot connect to that holy conscience, they must be returned by those of us who can. And this message may not be able to penetrate them. So I speak to those of you who can retrieve men and women from the dark. This spirit is here. And what this spirit's position is rebellion against creation and the love within it. Down to Aleister Crowley, speaking about masturbation as a form of child sacrifice. Down to the Epstein files and the destruction of innocence in ways that are documented that are not mentioning sacrifice, but one would presume if such darkness had already ensnared this collective of human consciousness, must play a role somewhere, and also here on the continent where it is happening. Your vitality, your essence, is to be nurtured, to be given to the will of our Creator. As I said recently to a dear and beloved brother of mine, perhaps the paradox is that the highest form of free will is to surrender your free will entirely, so that the will of our Creator can animate you, without the agreement or interference of a self who has its own predetermined free will. An absolute giving over of free will to the will of our source and its profound love may well be the highest possible use of free will a human could possibly engage in. To lose free will to the will of perfect love is the best use of free will that I can imagine a human being able to engage in. You may be somewhere on the road, but each macro decision you make will ensure that you are becoming closer and closer to giving your free will to the will of the divine, so that the will of the perfected love, the light of Christ, can animate your intelligence. Not only animate it, but animate it in a manner whereby there is no presence of a voice, an inward narrative that agrees or disagrees. That would be the perfected human. That would be the Christ embodied within a human. And it's not attainable permanently. I am aware of this. But if you have touched those moments, that is your destination, that is your goal, that is how we challenge this spirit. That is the end goal of all theology, all religion, all spiritual practice. It's the human whereby they have reached the attainment of giving the gift of free will to such a degree that they give their free will away and say, allow the love of God, which knows more of love than the one here, whose love is distorted through relationship and condition, and allow it to be the shape and form that I am. In that space, this spirit can not only not penetrate the human, but this spirit is now unable to penetrate the human around that human. If the field of the human stands anchored in that space of surrender, it will have enough vitality to begin covering other humans with its shield. And this will become strenuous on the organism that is carrying that connection. The physical organism will feel it in their nervous system. But you are shielding. In the same way a father would shield his children from attackers, a father must understand and a mother must understand that they must shield their children from the attackers that you do not see. If somebody invaded your home, you would stand between your child and the invader. And yet, in this age, if we look at the metrics of technology, you can see that fathers are not only refusing to stand between the spiritual attackers of their home and their children, but are inviting them in with worship of this nature. When we look at the use of things like pornography and the metrics of how deeply it is being used, how many searches on Google are related to that topic, that gives us evidence that there are likely more men and women with families today who will spend time devoted to celebrating the destruction of creative energy in exchange for a memory of pleasure. As Aleister Crowley called it, child sacrifice. And this is not something that is uncommon. The editor of the X-Men story by Marvel, a writer for Marvel, has an open public talk, which I've done a video on, where he was teaching people to create written sigils, written symbols that you can masturbate on, and thus therefore sacrifice your creative force, and this spirit will return to you and give you what you have requested and asked for. That means that there are more men and women tonight in this world, according to Western metrics at least, who are going to dedicate focusing their energy on worshipping the giving of the generous heart of God and creation over to something that is distorted and damaging and perverse. And that is not only not standing between your children and this attacker, but it is opening inside your home a space to allow the attacker. It's building a door for them to enter the home in which you live. So let us grasp the magnitude of child sacrifice. You can think of the horrors, and we must, of a physical child. I am desensitized, I'd imagine, to it, and I apologize if this is felt, but I have been around it and I have seen it. But on the other side of this, there is this metaphysical string. And when we understand the metaphysical string, I perceive we can eliminate the physical end outcome of children being physically harmed. I also, in our work, have rescued more trafficked children than I know. More than I can possibly count at this moment, unless I sit down and list everybody. These children, they are abused and harmed. And I have had an employee who worked with us, who the entire family in a deep state of trauma. Their son had been raped in a satanic ritual ceremony, a child. And when you hear the testimonials or the confessions of those who are prosecuted for engaging in these rituals and behaviors, they speak of an exchange of energy. They say they are given some sort of energy, some sort of sense of well-being, like a drug off the back of engaging within it. Now, this is going off a small data set, and there are certain things that one cannot attain and collect, such as police statements, but I have the experience, the records within the mind that allow me to understand that there is something there. This is not purely a perverse, destructive soul who is acting out evil for the sake of evil. This is also an addict who has connected to something of a exchange where they are given some physical sense of well-being for an eternal exchange that they are yet to face the consequences of, that deep separation by destroying creation for temporary gain or commandment in some retrospects of the spirits of this world. That metaphysical string should be where we keep our focus. For we should recognize that the more we can hold the light, which is our duty, for the declaration of war against this spirit comes with the arrival of light. And when light arrives, it does not start battling dark. Dark simply has nowhere to hide. And therefore your goal, again, to anchor this heavy topic back into hope, is to recognize that the truth of our power to have enough of a glowing candle within us that our energy field can take those of us with energy fields that can be penetrated or are distorted and shield them until their field becomes impenetrable by these spirits and forces. So what we are looking at is an exchange between the God of this world, as Yeshua referenced it, and the Creator of all things and its generous heart that said, let there be life, and let infinite potential and free will be a part of it, or it will lack meaning. And in that paradoxical irony, as I say, it would appear that perhaps the highest use of free will is to give it to God, to allow God's will to enact itself through you. For we are not capable of that love. We have too many small distortions and conditions. So for a human to be acting where their intelligence is animated by that love, we must keep that light glowing. And if you recognize that keeping that light glowing is the way by which we are building a foundation in this world, so that those who are further into the front line have a stable ground to stand upon to begin addressing the physical of this problem. The metaphysical responsibility to resolve this lay with all of mankind who has chosen the light, to bring their fellow man to the light, to ensure that their light is bright enough that when it arrives, darkness has nowhere left to hide. The children who lose their life to this, it's an indescribable tragedy. The details of these ceremonies and rituals, the details of the memories, the records I hold, I do not need to share with you. But these are children that I love. Children I have sat opposite, listening, looking into their eyes, hearing how they were hunted by men with machetes if they were a child with albinism. Knowing those children who were not protected and that spirit did manage to harm them, and knowing and remembering the state that is indescribable and shall not be described, is incomprehensibly dark, and the only suitable word is evil for what has occurred to these children. That spirit has been playing the same game since Eden, if we use a scriptural terminology. Eden, the beginning of creation, where you split the electron from the atom, or you split the rib from Adam, atom, Eve, the rib, the electron, and begin the multiplication of all life that eventually gave birth to sentience. From the beginning, that spirit of distortion has been with humanity, and it has been offering the same bargain. It has been offering the same exchange. And those foolish enough to make that exchange are not out of the reach of God, but are on a trajectory with the abyss, simulation or realm, as I have labeled it in other talks. I stand here as part of a collective who are on the front line of this physical manifestation. It is a part of our work. We fight suffering, we fight poverty, we fight neglect, we fight trafficking, but we fight sacrifice. Eden is where this problem began. And in the life of the one speaking, and those who are connected to us in any way, shape or form, who are behind the same calling and story that God has given to them as has been given to the one speaking. We are solving that problem with Eden. For our new village, which is still under construction but already open, is the safest place in Africa for special needs children in crisis who are not with a loving biological family, of course. It is also the largest of its kind on the planet. Eden is a place where you will find children being cared for, being fed, educated, medicated. It is a place where you can look at the light in their eyes and have complete comfort that that spirit will never penetrate the home in which they are, for it is too heavily guarded metaphysically by the attitudes and behaviours of those of us who have been called into this inner circle to make this new Eden exist, and also physically by the physical elements that we must use within inside the work that we do, such as the security, such as the Maasai warriors and their brave stance on protecting these children. The world, if we do not see it through the lens that there is a spiritual dimension affecting us, makes no sense. To hear that a man would harm a child, to kill a child, sounds incomprehensible, for the boundaries of the goodness of most of humanity's imagination won't stretch there. But the truth is that we live in a spiritual world as well, meaning unseen forces and dimensions are present. And this ties into my last video, that the Lion of Judah is the most potent of holy light from the original source of creation. And it is penetrating our distorted world. It is penetrating our fallen world. And it is bringing light to awaken humanity. The Lion of Judah, if you haven't seen the video, being the head of the tribe of Judah, whose number is 186,400, which is the speed of light in a vacuum, meaning the Bible told you the speed of light, meaning it is metaphysically telling you the arrival of a particular light is going to save humanity. Eden that we are building and have built. Eden, that sanctuary for these children. Eden is a manifestation of the will of that light. And it came about through the opening of thousands of humans who said no to this spirit, to this darkness, and their intelligence being animated in thousands, tens of thousands of macro movements and decisions to allow that village to exist, and the other village, of course, which is our main village at this time. Eden is the direct example that hope is there. But hope is only built when we stand with indomitable faith that by keeping our light open, that by keeping our light awakened, that by perhaps, I hypothesize, the greatest use of free will is to take your free will and give it to the highest of love, Christ, and allow Christ to embody and animate the intelligence and actions of your life. Physical solutions are born from that internal place. And as Yeshua said, woe unto the lawgivers, for they take away the keys to the kingdom, for they do not enter within. When we open that, we open the solution. For when we open that, we bring light. And when light arrives, darkness has nowhere to go. And that begins to manifest physically in structures such as our beautiful Eden and our beautiful village here in Kilimanjaro. So this spirit, we should declare war. But our armory should be love. For it is a war and a battle we cannot win as personas, as egoic identities, as religious, spiritual identities, even as parental identities. For we need the all-knowingness of Source to direct in this huge, complex, spiritual fight that is ongoing, the direction by which we should be taking individually. And if you say, well, I am home and I'm not connected to this, anchor your light. If you anchor your light, you are building a foundation for those who are at the front, who may be able to physically rescue a child today, to have the clarity of mind, the readiness to be present. For it is one body of Christ and many parts. It is one body of light. And if you are home anchoring light, you might be giving strength to a man or a woman who is out here in the bush, kicking doors down to rescue these children. You may be giving insight to the police officer who gets a tip-off and finds the child and brings them to safety. You may even give space for the angelic to enter the mind of a man like that man who sacrificed his own son and divert his intelligence to question and be animated in another direction. In a nation where only around 19% of births are registered, the magnitude of this problem is outside of the metrics of data. But when you have men sacrificing their own sons and being prosecuted and sentenced to hanging for it, you must understand the power of that spirit. And that spirit can only work in the darkness. And so we must allow the light to arrive, for when it does, dark has no more places to hide. So remember this, the metaphysical string. This is all about an exchange. The generous heart of creation is pouring forth and allowing for all things. And that can become a masterpiece of a life of holiness. And this other spirit of rebellion sees that and says, if this is destroyed, I can gain something from it. I can rebel and challenge the force of Creator and its will. And if I can enter a human to assist as an avatar in that practice, I will. And when you look at the other side, the ritualistic sexual abuse, which, as I say, recently I was involved in a case where a child was abused and the father and family were relocated for their safety to near us and employed. The men who engage in that speak of it like a drug. So some spiritual energy is said to be given to them, which makes them feel some temporary relief from the dramatic levels of voids within them that they carry. But those voids can never be filled by the world. You will clamber non-stop into perversion to fill them if you try to fulfill them through the sensory elements of your body. The void can only be filled with the light, and the light can only inhabit the vessel that is standing tall in the will of a love that is perfected, that is not a love that is readily available to a human who does not die to self. For that love will come and say to I as a father, go here and rescue that child, and as a father I may say, no, it endangers my life and my own biological children here need me. There, unless you hate your mother, your father, your own children, as Jesus said, you can't be my disciple, is the problem. Most of us have not yet found that surrender where we take the gift of free will and say, the highest use I have for it is to give it to you, the source of all, and let your love embody and animate all of what I am. And there you will see children made safe from this darkness. There you will see them made safe from the darkness of the sexual, satanic abuse, the ritualistic sacrificial abuse. But further back to one of the most corrosive elements, if we follow Alistair Crowley's language of child sacrifice, that which is prevalent more than any other, I would say, in the West, the men and women who are surrendering their creative energy at a screen where people are traumatized and damaged and filled with that spirit. And I know from personal experience that those who are engaged in that industry of pornographic entertainment are a victim of that spirit of the highest order. For a man who was engaged in that industry once tried to take my life, and it was predicted in a dream by my wife, which is why it never took place. He was not planning it, but the spirit that was using his organism was planning it. And it took place. He was restrained by 8 men while screaming, "John, where are you?" And I barely knew this man. He came as a guest with somebody else to assist us with something. And it was a last-minute decision which now can never occur. For our vetting is so deep for people to come here. It is not an open door policy for us, due to events of other natures as well, this being one. But to come back to that major element, that spirit is still on that metaphysical chain, taking advantage of the destruction of the gift of creation and the innocence and purity of creation by contorting it into something that can be filled with shame and despair and harm in exchange for our sacred right as a child of God for money and materiality that you find in the industry of pornography and those who are addicted or engaged with it. Child sacrifice is a spirit that must be driven out of humanity in its entirety. And for all we have physically helped these children, it was coordinated by light, not by the thoughts and planning of man, but by the arrival of light, anchored in men and women, that made it impossible for when light arrives, dark has nowhere left to go or be. The same spirit operating in a witch doctor in these foothills, killing children, killing animals in exchange for energy and favors from this worldly spirit, is the exact same spirit that the billionaires were engaged with. And it's offering the same exchange. But it's futile. And the village we are building, Eden, should be evidence that if enough of us anchor that light, the victory is won. And until it is, may we continue to anchor that light and pray against it. Create opportunities for the angelic to stop this, even if you can't see it or pinpoint your location that you're praying for. Set a foundation with your light, so those who can be directed, have more of an opportunity to find and rescue these beloved innocent children of creation. I shall leave it there. I love you all. God bless, guys. We can win this, and I declare war on it. But the weapon I choose is love, for the greatest damage to that kingdom and its ways that I have seen have come from love. Not anger and violence, which can naturally rise in a human when these things are taking place, but never leads to a sustainable, long-term solution of safety, which I have seen only manifest by anchoring the light, which is the Christ, which makes you impenetrable and also a shield to others so they have time to become impenetrable too. And when more and more of us are impenetrable, that spirit will be purified and cast away from our human story. God bless you all. I love you. Bye.